So abuse by women is a blind spot in the safeguarding discourse and even in research. And research can be used to make transparent different dimensions of the problem and the scope of the problem. And therefore we start this morning with two presentations on abuse by women, one victim-centered and one perpetrator-centered. And the first speaker this morning will be Dr. Jelena Gerke. She comes from my department. She has a PhD and she did her study on the abuse by women. She works a lot together with the Independent Commissioner Against Child Abuse in Germany. So she is an expert in child protection and she graduated in trauma therapy. And Jelena, we are very glad to have you here. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for this introduction. As Professor Fegert said, I want to talk about female-perpetrated child sexual abuse more from a victim-centered perspective. But before I start with the research results that we have, I would like to start with a little exercise, and I would like to ask you to read the sentences that I will show here, and I will also read them loud to you, and I would ask you to rate them for yourselves, whether you would say this is sexual abuse or this is not sexual abuse in my opinion. And I want to ask you to think about it not very long and to rate them very spontaneously. You can maybe have a Likert scale in your head, and you say from 1, no, this is not sexual abuse at all, through 7, yes, I would say this is sexual abusive behavior. A stepmother bathes her 11-year-old stepson. And you can just rate it in your head. A stepfather bathes his 11-year-old stepdaughter. At an opportunity, a 20-year-old male teacher kisses a 14-year-old female student on the cheek. At an opportunity, a 25-year-old female teacher kisses a 14-year-old male student on the cheek. A 12-year-old boy sleeps in bed together with a female relative. A 12-year-old girl sleeps in bed together with a male relative. A 30-year-old stepfather watches pornographic, sexually explicit videos together with his 16-year-old stepdaughter. A 30-year-old stepmother watches pornographic and sexually explicit videos with her 16-year-old stepson. Now, as you've read or heard these sentences, you might have noticed in your ratings or in your very spontaneous feelings that you had, that you rated the situations with the women a little bit different than the situations with the male adults. And this is the gender-based bias that we all have because we grew up in the society with the gendered stereotypes that we have grown up with. And we are not the only ones that have this gender-based bias. We also gave these and some more short sentences to about 2,000 professionals from the medical and psychotherapeutic and pedagogical field. And we found that these professionals, and they were a big number, it was a very big sample, so we can say this is a result for the professionals. We also saw here that the situations with the male adult was rated more likely sexual abusive compared to the situations with the female. You can see that here in the curve, the red curve for the male, the situations with the male adults is more towards the higher number. This difference in ratings is more likely if the situation is quite ambiguous. If you have a situation like sleeping together in the same bed with a 12-year-old child, it's quite ambiguous and it's not so clear whether this is abusive or whether this is just okay. And in an ambiguous situation like this, the ratings of situations with male and females will be more different than in a very clear situations like watching a pornographic video with a 16-year-old. In this situation, we have very high ratings saying this is abusive and this is not okay for male and female adults. So especially these very ambiguous situations, women get a lot more freedom and a lot more trust in advance with children. As I said, this is due to gender stereotypes and social convictions that we have, and we have these gender stereotypes in our perception and judgments, not only for gender, but also for mothers, for persons from different religions, from different origins, and so on. Part of these gender stereotypes are the sexual scripts that we have. We have internalized sexual scripts for appropriate female behavior and sexual behavior. That these are saying female are sexually less interested and less aggressive, while males are in sexual interactions the aggressors and the leading parts. This social construct leads us to deny and to trivialize the aggressive and selfish potential that women also have. And if we don't know about a problem, and if we don't recognize such a selfish potential and aggressive potential, then we cannot recognize the problems that come with it. And we also have a very high level of trust, not only in female people and women, but also in certain professions, such as doctors, nurses, and teachers. I will come to that later when we are at the topic of female perpetrators in institutions. So, as I said, the problem is that we cannot recognize what we don't know. So this is why we have to build up knowledge on this issue of female-perpetrated sexual abuse and female perpetrators. So I come to the child sexual abuse, and this is the general frequency for child sexual abuse. It's about, we have read this in many, many studies. We have a lot of big meta-analyses and reviews on the frequency of child sexual abuse, and we know that it's about 13 to 20% for girls and 5 to 8% for boys, and in the German representative studies we find similar numbers. However, none of these very frequently cited studies have included information on the difference between male and female perpetrators. So that's why we in our university did a study, a representative German study with 2,500 participants, and we were asking them whether they have experienced child sexual abuse, and if they did so, who was the perpetrator. And we could see that about 10% of the victims of child sexual abuse named a female perpetrator. And we also saw that the male victims, significantly higher, more often named a female perpetrator, and it was about 4 times more often than in case of a male perpetrator. We then conducted a second study, representative study in the German population, and we were asking those who were saying, I'm a victim of child sexual abuse, whether they've been abused by a female perpetrator or a male perpetrator or both genders, because very often they are also abused by more than one perpetrator and they can be of different genders. And we found here that 6.6% were perpetrated by a female perpetrator, but additionally 21% said I was abused by perpetrators of both genders. So we can see here that 1/4 of all victims were abused by a woman by herself or a woman perpetrating together with a man. So this is a very high number of victims that have also experienced abuse by women. In this study, we also asked who was the female perpetrator, what was the relation that you had to this perpetrator. And many said it was my biological mother, it was my mother. And it was about 26% of the victims of female perpetrators saying my own mother was the perpetrator, and this was not including stepmothers or foster mothers and so on. It was only biological mothers. And we could see that in the group of female perpetrators there were more mothers than there were fathers in the group of male perpetrators. Of course, the number is smaller of mothers as perpetrators than fathers as perpetrators, but the share within the group of female perpetrators was higher for mothers. In this study, we could describe that mothers did not only play an important role as a perpetrator, but also as a bystander. You were just mentioning bystanders and upstanders. We were asking about bystanders, meaning individuals that witnessed the sexual abuse, but they did not offer any help, or they looked away and did nothing. So bystanders can maybe accidentally see or hear about the sexual abuse, or they were told about it. Of all victims of abuse, independently of perpetrator gender, every other victim said, yes, there was someone knowing about the abuse and did not do anything. So every second victim has someone knowing about it, not doing anything. And most of the time it was the mother. So the biological mother was the most often named bystander. If you look at all the cases of child sexual abuse by a male perpetrator, 1/3 named the mother as the bystander who did not help or did not do something against it. Maybe I will go very quickly about the types of abuse, because I think we will hear a bit more about it on the perpetrator talk. But in many times people were asking what are the types of abuse that females can do. And I think the very easy answer is they can do anything that male perpetrators can do. We did another question that's often coming, what is the consequences? Because assuming that females cannot do abuse that is as bad or as hard or as violent as male perpetrators, you could assume maybe the consequences are not as bad, because the females, they will do more soft abuse. And as I said, the types of abuse are the same, so females can abuse as violent as male perpetrators can do. And we were looking at the consequences of female perpetrated child sexual abuse and whether this is different to the consequences of male perpetrated child sexual abuse. And we asked, we have a helpline in Germany where people can call when they have experienced child sexual abuse and can tell their story, and sometimes they also talk about the consequences they experienced. And we looked at this data that is collected at this helpline, and we could compare 3,500 victims of child sexual abuse that were talking about their experiences and the consequences, and about 8% of them, of these 3,500 victims, have experienced child sexual abuse by a woman. And we could find differences in the psychiatric diagnoses that were told to us by these victims. And we found that victims of female perpetration would rather name suicidality, self-harming behavior, and, for example, alcohol and drug addiction, while victims of male perpetration would rather name post-traumatic stress disorder, affective disorder, eating disorder, and so on. And then we were wondering, how could we interpret this now? Why is this different? Because we were, this is independent of victim gender, it's independent of severity of abuse and duration of abuse. So we could, with the statistical methods, put this to the side. So these differences are very much dependent on the perpetrator gender. And these differences are also due to gender stereotypes and social scripts that we have, because the victims of female perpetrators, of course, they also grew up with the gender stereotypes in society that we all have, so they for themselves could not recognize the abuse by women because they grew up with it. If a woman perpetrates a very young child every day and it's the mother, for example, looking at the genitals every night, then the children don't know that this is not normal. So maybe the children cannot name the abuse they experienced, so it's harder for them to find help. And this is why they have these consequences that they have, because they are using an escapist strategy. And this is a dysfunctional coping mechanism where I try to numb my feelings, for example, with alcohol or by self-harming myself. While the victims of male perpetration, they rather know about that they have experienced something that is not right, and they have the types of disorders that are more associated with the feelings. As I said, I will come to the topic of female perpetrators in an institutional context, because this is an area that's a taboo and a taboo and a taboo, because it has not been looked at all. And I try to summarize a little bit the scientific literature that we have, and we don't have a lot. We have mainly this one PhD thesis by Mrs. Darling that described, she looked at female perpetrators that have been imprisoned, and she said mostly the female perpetrators in institution, they act alone. She said they have fewer psychological problems or substance abuse problems compared to previous studies on female perpetrators in general, and we will hear about female perpetrators in general later. And they usually have no prior convictions or notable professional misconduct, so it's not like you would really easily recognize the female perpetrators in an institutional context. There's one study, but it has a very small sample, saying female perpetrators in institutional context are also more violent than male perpetrators, but this has to be interpreted with caution, because they are saying they are more violent, but maybe there are only the more severe cases that have been discovered, so I wouldn't be too sure about that. The victims of female perpetrators in an institutional context are often vulnerable teenagers that will come to a female professional, maybe talking about their mobbing and bullying experiences, talking about an outing on their gender identity or sexual identity, and the female professional will abuse this situation of trust to abuse the vulnerable teenagers. Victims are also more often boys in an institutional context, and there have been described two peaks in the victim age. So victims are very high numbered in kindergarten age and then later in adolescence. The female perpetrator would groom and abuse by integrating into the victim's peer group. So the perpetrator makes herself seem relatable and trustworthy. She would initiate sexualized conversation, often under the guise of openness and education, as I said before, also in situations where the adolescents will come to her and opening up with a difficult topic. This small study with only few perpetrators added to that they will be acting in a more direct and authoritarian manner compared to male perpetrators, but here again it was a small sample, so this is just a first tendency. The female perpetrators will do activities outside the institutional settings like day trips and home visits. They have extensive contact with the adolescents via digital media. And the offenses will be more often committed outside the organization. So they will groom and connect to the children and adolescents inside the institutional context, but then have those offenses committed outside, like in the home of the perpetrator or the victim. And the acts are committed within a relationship of trust and mentorship. So we can see here there are very many similarities to male perpetrators in an institutional context. So there might not be too many differences to male perpetrators. As I said before, we have this helpline, sexual abuse in Germany, where people can call, maybe victims can call and talk about their experiences, but also the social surrounding of the victim or the relatives can call if they are worried about a child, or even anyone can call that has a question on this topic. And it's there since 2010, and it's funded by the German Independent Commissioner of Child Sexual Abuse. The data is collected anonymously and documented by the counselor in a survey grid when the caller agrees to that. Our university does the research on this helpline to explain more the issues that the caller have and how prevention can go forward. The callers are about 1/3 victims and 2/3 relatives in the social environment of the victims and professionals with questions. And there are reports of child abuse in the past, suspicions of abuse, need for emotional relief, and information requests. And so far we have a data set of over 30,000 documented calls with quantitative and qualitative data. So we have numbered data and also short citations and quotes. And I looked at these data for female perpetrators in an institutional context because, as I said, there's very little research on it, and we try to add to that a little bit. Within all the calls where people have talked about their own experiences of abuse, you can see here the share of the female perpetrators is 6%. So it's a little bit less than what we would expect according to the representative studies. Within these 6% of people talking about female perpetration, we can see that 20% has happened in an institutional context and about 60% in intrafamilial context. And this is also very similar to what we see for male perpetration, the share of 20% in an institutional context. There were 84 cases of female perpetration in an institutional context, and I just named the roles of the female perpetrators, and you can see there like only 1, 2, 3, so they are small numbers, but this can show you that perpetrator can be anyone: school teachers, trainers, foster mothers, nuns, deaconess, nurses, sports coaches. So all these women were described as perpetrators in an institutional context. And I collected here the church context, and you can see, again, the numbers are very low, but this is just here to show you that anyone, even the director of a care home, teacher, counselor, deaconess, they can be the perpetrator. Here again, we found the male victims affected more often than female victims. And we also found these two peaks in ages. We found that there is one peak in the kindergarten age and one peak in adolescence. But then you can see the different colors, and the different colors represent data. The green have been reported by others, so by relatives, social surrounding, and so on. And the blue has been reported by the victims themselves. They have called when they were adults and said, I was abused by a female perpetrator in an institution when I was 14, 15, or 17. And we see these two peaks, but we also see that they were described by different caller groups. So the surroundings, they are more worried about children in kindergarten age. And the people who have experienced abuse themselves, they are more talking about female perpetration in adolescent age. So we can see here that the professionals and the relatives, they are not too much worried about the adolescents. So here we have to look a bit more. We have to look out a little bit more for our adolescent victims. I want to describe the types of abuse that have been named by the victims, and you will see this is very explicitly described because female perpetration is very hard to imagine for all of us because of the gender stereotypes, and this is why I think it's very important to name it, to make it imaginable. As I said, female perpetrators can do all the types of abuse that males can do, hands-on abuse. Here you can see it hidden as a game. The equine therapist says this is a game and your reward will be that you can ride the horses with bells on your nipples. Kindergarten teacher tickling the daughter of the caller, but also tickling her genital area. You can see women licking and touching children. You can see them forcing them from their situation of power, forcing the students to drive in a driving lesson belly-free and touching the belly. Female perpetrators can also do violence with penetration, penetration by a babysitter, for example, with vegetables. And you will also see that women perpetrators will make use of digital media by taking pictures while abusing the children. This is everything we also know from male perpetrators. What is now specific to female perpetrated child sexual abuse? That's abuse during care, because it's still the situation that many women will care for the children and do the everyday activities. So we have a lot of description of abuse during care, for example, during washing or during changing the diaper. Specific to female perpetrated child sexual abuse is also the misunderstanding and denial. The people calling when they were adults, they're oftentimes talking about how they didn't understand that this was wrong. They were like, when I was a teenager, this felt cool and I was curious and I thought this was a good thing. But now as an adult, I realize that I haven't come to terms with it and that I have problems with my sexualization and I have difficulties with it. And we have the culture of denials when the victims, they are talking to professionals saying, I have experienced abuse by a female. They are often not taken serious and their experience are being trivialized. What's now specific to institutional female perpetrated child sexual abuse? And I will call this sexualized punishment because oftentimes victims of institutional abuse, they are describing something that's very in between punishment in terms of physical abuse and sexual abuse, like being spanked on the naked bottom by the childminder and then being manipulated on the anus, or students that have to say vagina or penis when they do something wrong. So it's a mix of punishment from the situation of power and sexualized punishment, and this is what we have described a lot in research. Specific to institutional female perpetration is also the false framing. We have many victims saying, but I was in a romantic relationship as a teenager with an adult caregiver, or she was seducing me. So they are using these words far away from violence and abuse describing this situation with the violence by the female perpetrator, which has also been falsely framed by the females, calling it romantic relationships and so on. So I will come to a short conclusion, and I think the most important conclusion is female sexual perpetration is more similar to male perpetration than assumed. It's not so much different, it's not softer, it's not less consequences, it's very similar to male perpetration. So what we have to do considering female perpetration is breaking gender stereotypes. As we have seen in the very first exercise, we all have them in our head and we have to be conscious about them. And we have to be aware about our own gender stereotypes. And regarding research, I think we need more specific and more research at all regarding especially this overlap between physical and sexual violence, which I will call sexualized punishment, that many children and adolescents have experienced in the institutional context by the females that have been taking care of them. And we have to look a bit more about this very specific female perpetrator strategy of false framing the abuse and the violence as relationship and seduction. And I want to thank you for your attention and end with these quotes that are very typical quotes, but I changed the gender of these quotes to confuse you all a little bit in the end. Thank you.